Hi, this is Steve back at the Listening Post, and today I'd like to talk about Lucinda Williams, a singer-songwriter and guitar player who had a lot to do with popularizing the Americana movement in the mid-90s, Americana being a style of music that combines several different styles, including folk, country, bluegrass, blues, and rock and roll. I first heard of Lucinda Williams when the San Francisco Chronicle wrote a glowing review of one of her shows, and I went and picked up her album that was out at the time, Sweet Old World. This would have been, 94, 95 maybe, and then caught her show the next time she came to the city. She played at a club called Slim's in San Francisco, which is named for Boss Skaggs. That's his nickname, Slim, and he was the one that opened the club. And one of the things I remember about that show was for one thing, the number of encores they did. I mean, they must have played 6 or 7 encores that night. And at one point, she just told the audience, "This is what we love to do," and they just kept coming back out for more. The other thing I remember about that night is her appearance. She's always, when you see her in public and on a lot of her album covers, she's got the bleached blonde hair and the heavy mascara and looks a bit like a cowpunk. But the night I saw her, she was just in this little cotton dress and kind of had reddish brown hair with a little straw cowboy hat on. And it just looked like she'd been back in the kitchen baking cookies. So quite a different appearance, but a great show. She was really good that night, and I hope to see her again someday. Lucinda Williams was born in 1953 in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Her father was the poet laureate, Miller Williams, who read at President Clinton's second inaugural address. He's currently a literature professor at the University of Arkansas. Lucinda Williams discovered folk music through her mother, especially the music of Joan Baez, who she sounds a lot like at times. And her father was a big Hank Williams fan, so at a very early age she was exposed to folk and country music. Her father was also an amateur pianist. Lucinda Williams started writing music when she was just 6 years old, after hearing Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited, and she learned the guitar when she was 12. When she was 14 years old, she attended a concert by Peter, Paul, and Mary and says she was mesmerized. At 16, she discovered the writing of Southern novelist Flannery O'Connor, who she says was a major influence on her songwriting. And that is one of the neat things about Lucinda Williams' lyrics, is they're very observational. A lot of times you feel like you're reading a novel by John Steinbeck or William Faulkner, especially going back to the Deep South. And she's got a very keen eye for not just writing songs about love and pain, but writing how the love and the pain affects people and how they respond to it. Lucinda is a product of a broken home. Her parents divorced, and her father gained custody of her and her younger brother and sister, and he was a visiting professor, so moved the family around quite a bit to different locations, including New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Mississippi, Arkansas, Utah. They also resided for a time in Mexico City and Santiago, Chile. In 1970, Lucinda Williams played publicly for the first time during her father's stay in Mexico City. She was part of a duo with her friend Clark Jones, a banjo player. She briefly attended the University of Arkansas, but dropped out to pursue a career in music. And by her early 20s, she was performing around New Orleans as a folk artist, mixing cover tunes with traditional styled originals. In 1974, she relocated to Austin, Texas, became part of the roots music scene there. She split her time between Austin and Houston, then moved to New York City, where she recorded a demo tape and began marketing her music. In 1978, she moved to Jackson, Mississippi to record her first album at the famous Malaco Studios, known for their soul albums in the 70s. The first album was on Smithsonian Folkways, and it was entitled Ramblin' on My Mind, all covers of of country and blues and Cajun music. Her only accompaniment on this album is guitarist John Gramado. In 1980, Lucinda Williams returned back to Houston and recorded her second album. This album is entirely made up of originals. It's called Happy Woman Blues, and this is definitely worth picking up. And by the way, if you can see that picture on the cover, that's about how she looked like when I saw her. Just a pretty cotton dress and a real down-to-earth kind of a persona. Some of the highlights on this album include the opening track, Lafayette, a song called I Lost It, which is kind of interesting because she never actually tells you what it is that she lost. Maria, real pretty ballad that sounds a lot like a Joan Baez tune, by the way. On this album, there's Mickey White on guitar and Rex Bell on bass, two musicians who were part of Townes Van Zant's band. 1984, Lucinda Williams moved to Los Angeles. She took voice lessons to learn how to sound like Joan Baez. She performed both in a solo acoustic setting and with the backing of a rock band. She briefly signed a contract with CBS Records, but never put anything out because CBS wasn't sure how to market her. And while she was in Los Angeles, she was married for a short time to Greg Souders, the drummer for the LA folk rock band The Long Riders. 1988, Lucinda Williams moved back to Nashville and released her third album, kind of an upbeat country rock album, just titled Lucinda Williams. This was released on the Rough Trade record label, a British label known more for punk rock bands. And this is where she begins to take on a little bit of a cowpunk persona. This album's co-produced by her guitarist, Gurf Morlix, and it's got a couple of great tracks on it, included I Just Wanted to See You So Bad, Change the Locks, Side of the Road, one of her prettiest compositions, Passionate Kisses, which was later covered by Mary-Chapin Carpenter, and in 1994 won Lucinda Williams her first Grammy for Best Country Song of the Year, Best Folk Song, I think, of the year. Jim Lauderdale provides backing vocals on this album, and he will show up frequently as a vocalist on Lucinda Williams albums. This album was re-released in 1998 on Koch Records and includes several live bonus tracks. In 1990, Patty Loveless covered the song The Night's Too Long from this album, and that reached number 20 on the Billboard charts. Lucinda Williams then released in 1992 Sweet Old World. This is kind of a folkier album, more organic sounding than the last one. The title track has to do with the suicide of a family friend, the poet Frank Stanford. It's also got another song on it called Pinola, which is about suicide. When I saw her at Slim's, the first two tracks she did were Pinola and then Hot Blood off this album. There's also one called 6 Blocks Away with a pretty upbeat kind of a rocker. Something About What Happens When We Talk, a nice little ballad. She finishes the album with a Nick Drake cover, Which Will. Sweet Old World won rave reviews, and Lucinda Williams toured Australia with Roseanne Cash and Mary-Chapin Carpenter, who covered her song Passionate Kisses. 1993, Lucinda Williams performed a duet with Jimmy Dale Gilmore called Reunion on his album Spinning Around the Sun. In 1993, Emmylou Harris covered Crescent City for her album Cowgirl's Prayer, and she also covered Sweet Old World for her 1995 album Wrecking Ball. 1996, Tom Petty covered Change the Locks for the soundtrack of the film She's the One. 1995, Williams signed with Rick Rubin's American Recordings label and began work on her breakthrough album, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. This album was begun in Austin. Her guitar player, Gurf Morlix, was going to produce it. The album got about 90% finished, and Lucinda Williams shelved the album. She wasn't satisfied with the results. She had a falling out with Gurf Morlix, moved to Nashville and recruited Steve Earle to produce the album, redid it again from scratch. When it was finished in Nashville, then she went to Los Angeles with it, and she had Roy Bittan, a keyboard player for Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, remix the entire album. It was finally released in 1998. Rick Rubin's American recording label was sold to Universal Music Group, and this record was released by Mercury, which was a subsidiary. Lucinda Williams, I guess, by this point was developing a reputation as somebody who's difficult to work with. In the 70s, Orson Welles, the famous film director of Citizen Kane and Touch of Evil, he used to do commercials for Paul Masson wine, and his big catch line was, "We will sell no wine before it's time." And that was kind of Lucinda Williams' attitude towards releasing albums. She may have been difficult to work with, but the proof is in the pudding. These last three albums are all widely considered classics and considered to be her best three albums. This one in particular, it's got some great tracks on it. Too Cool to Be Forgotten, Drunken Angel, about the doomed Texas songwriter Blaze Foley. It's got a really funky rocker called Joy on it. A song I really like a lot, Concrete and Barbed Wire. This album kind of sounds a lot like her live sound. It's not necessarily her best album, I don't think, but it's the one where her audience reached critical mass, and so it's widely considered her classic release. It won the Grammy for Best Contemporary Folk Album, was her first album to go gold, reached number 65 on the Billboard album charts, was voted the best album of the year by Village Voice. In 2003, Rolling Stone ranked it number 304 on their list of 500 greatest albums of all time. 2006, Polygram released the deluxe edition. That's actually the one I've got, and that's got a second disc containing a concert from Philadelphia's World Cafe. You can see this is the 2 CD deluxe edition. After this, she ended up on the Lost Highway record label, which was known for its Americana roots music. In 2001, she released Essence, which was produced by Bob Dylan's guitarist Charlie Sexton. And Bo Ramsey came in and replaced Gurf Morlix on guitars. This album is a little bit more folksy than the last one. Some people kind of think of it as a step back, but it's still a strong album. It's got a couple of real nice tracks on it. Lonely Girls opens the album. It's got a nice little rocker on it called Out of Touch that she does a great version on her Live at the Fillmore release. Are You Down sounds a little bit like a J.J. Cale song from the 70s. The title track, Essence, is a very seductive track. She won her third Grammy for a song on this called Get Right With God, which is kind of a Delta blues rave-up. She won the Grammy for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance. 2003, Lucinda Williams turned 50 years old and released the album World Without Tears. This was produced by Bob Dylan's engineer Mark Howard. This has got a little bit of a psychedelic 60s vibe to it. Several of the tracks have a lot of Fender tremolo on them, including the opening track and one of the other ones here. People Talking. It's got a nice little drum beat that sounds like it might have been borrowed by Levon Helm of the band. Overtime has got the vibrato on it real heavily. The title track, World Without Tears, is real nice. 2004, Lucinda Williams recorded a duet with Elvis Costello called There's a Story in Your Voice. This was from his album The Delivery Man. She was also guest vocalist on the song Factory Girls from the Irish punk folk band Flogging Molly on their album Within a Mile of Home. In 2005, she released her Live at the Fillmore album, and I don't have that right now. I used to have a copy of that, but it's a great album, really captures her live sound real well. There's a criticism that it doesn't have any new music on it, but it's a nice live summary of everything she had done up to that point. Doug Pettibone joined the band at this point as her lead guitarist, and he will appear on her next several albums. In 2006, she recorded a version of the John Hartford classic Gentle on My Mind, and that was used over the closing credits of the Will Ferrell film Talladega Nights. She also sang a duet with folk legend Rambling Jack Elliott, the song Careless Darling from his release I Stand Alone. 2007, Lucinda Williams released West. And this album, it's a good album, but it's in a way kind of a low point emotionally for her. Her mother had just passed away, and she had just broken up with her boyfriend. And this is a very introspective album, whereas her earlier releases were more outward looking and at times nostalgic. This one just has to do with her situation in the present and some of the heartache she's feeling. She's got Doug Pettibone back on guitar. It's got some good tracks on it. Unsuffer Me sounds a little bit like something Portishead might have done. Really cool trip-hop band from the 90s. The opening track, Are You All Right? I remember her performing that on the David Letterman show one night. Learning How to Live is a good song. Where Is My Love? That's got kind of a jazzy guitar and violin backing that sounds a little bit like Django Reinhardt and Stephen Grappelli. Learning How to Live kind of reminds me a little bit of a Taylor Swift song. She was on TV recently and did a song called something like I Am Never Going Back to You. This one says, I'm learning how to live without you in my life. Not her best stuff. It did debut at number 14 on the Billboard 200 charts and was listed number 18 on Rolling Stone's list of top 50 albums of 2007. 2008, Lucinda Williams released Little Honey. And this is a pretty cool album. It's got kind of a Bakersfield honky-tonk sound to it, and kind of opens up. It opens up with a rock song called Real Love that actually has a false start, which is kind of interesting for an album to open up with a song with a false start. Tears of Joy's got a nice bluesy guitar lead. Well, Well, Well has got a real kind of a Texas Roadhouse kind of a sound to it. Features backing vocals by Jim Lauderdale and Charlie Louvin of the Louvin Brothers. Matthew Sweet and Susanna Hoffs, who recorded an album together. Susanna Hoffs, of course, of the Bangles. They provide backing vocals on some of these tracks. 2009, Lucinda Williams performed with M. Ward on the song Oh Lonesome Me from her album, or his album, Hold Time. In September 2009, Williams married Best Buy music executive Tom Overby. They married on stage at the Minneapolis First Avenue Music Club. Her father, Miller Williams, performed the ceremony in an homage to Hank Williams, who was married publicly in New Orleans in the 1950s. In 2011, Lucinda Williams released her most recent album, Blessed. This was produced by Don Was of the band Was Not Was. He's produced a lot of different people through the years, including Bob Dylan and the Rolling Stones. He produced Bonnie Raitt's album Nick of Time, which won the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1990. This was recorded at Capitol Studios in Hollywood and features Elvis Costello on lead guitar, and boy, does he ever channel his inner crazy horse on some of these songs. By the way, I didn't mention it, but West, the title of that album, refers back to Lucinda Williams moving to Los Angeles, moving out west. This album, Blessed, opens up with a nice rocker called Buttercup. A song called Copenhagen. That's the town she was in when she learned that her former manager, Frank Collari, had passed away. It's got another song on it called Seeing Black, which was inspired by the Georgia singer Vic Chestnut, who died of an overdose. Soldier's Songs, a nice ballad. Sounds a little bit like it could have come off Jackson's Brown Late for the Sky album. It's got that kind of a 70s LA vibe to it. The album concludes with a song called Kiss Like You Kiss, very intimate song. And Ugly Truth, another song with Elvis Costello really rocking out on lead guitar. She's got a couple of DVDs out. This one is live from Austin City Limits, 1989. There's a second DV from Austin City Limits that was recorded in 1998. And she's also got this, there's a series called Artist's Choice. And it's artists such as Lucinda Williams and Bob Dylan compiling music that they were influenced by. And this has gotten really good reviews. So for the completists out there, it's something to consider. Well, that's all I've got. So once again, you can read the full essay on the Totally Guitars website. And I encourage you to check out Lucinda Williams. I really like her a lot, and I think you will too. Once again, this is Steve at the Listening Post, and we will see you again next time.